Being a young father, I mean, I was actually talking to another person the other day about this, and we were talking about that, and someone said to me, they goes, "Do you remember what it was like before you were a dad?" And I'm like, not much, you know. Like I don't know if you had the same experience. I know I've talked to a few other people, and they kind of had that same experience where it's like you almost just like forget everything that kind of happened prior to that child, showing up in your life, and it's a weird feeling. It's almost like even though it can literally just be a 24-hour period, it's like everything before was like a distant memory.
Welcome to the Business of Parenting podcast. Tune in as we discuss the principles of successful parenting as a business professional. Here's your host, Jason Harris.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? It is Jason Harris here, and thank you for joining me on another episode of BOP, the Business of Parenting podcast, where I get to talk anything and everything I want to talk when it comes to parenting, and if you don't like it, you can turn it off. No, I'm just kidding. Don't turn it off. We're trying to kick off the show. No, I'm just kidding. Today, I have an amazing guest with me. I have the one, the only, the infamous Mr. Brandon Smith. Brandon, what's up? How you doing?
Doing very well, Jason. Thank you so much for having me. And if anyone's infamous, it's definitely you.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Hey, Brandon, man, we got some fun topics we're going to jam about today, and I really appreciate you just coming on and chatting with us. It's like you'd be amazed, how many people I've kind of reached out to that are just kind of, maybe they're a little concerned about just, being real and authentic, about themselves, but I find in the automotive industry, but in many industries, but in the automotive industry, it's actually kind of hard. We're very authentic. We're very real. We're kind of those, like us or don't, we just don't particularly care, so I think it's great, but I think the automotive industry is just such a great place to kind of have this kind of conversation around, because it's an industry that's very much so, suck it up, buttercup, check it out the door, not a lot of empathy, not a lot of emotion, bell to bell. If you got a delivery on your day off, management's like, well, when are you coming? Just that type of mentality. And I just think this is a great place to kind of really talk about how we balance this stuff out. So before we kind of get into our topics, let's talk a little bit about kind of your background. So I'd love to kind of tell me a little bit about just your professional life, and a little bit about your family life, and then we'll kick off our conversation from there.
Sure, that sounds great. So my name is Brandon Smith. I'm 36 years old this year. Back in February, I turned 36. I'm married. My wife is a stay-at-home mom, thank God. And I have two young daughters. Thea is my oldest. She turns 6 in July. And Everly is my youngest. She just turned 1 in February as well. She actually is about 15 months old now. And we're all home with COVID right now. So this gives us some time to do this, which is fun. But normally when I am working, I am the sales manager at Steel Chevrolet in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. We are the largest GM dealership on the east coast of Canada. And I've been in the automotive industry for about 8 or 9 years now. And I've done a lot of different roles. I've been a salesperson, finance manager, sales manager, general sales manager. I've done everything on the sales side I can probably think of, and I still love the industry. I love growing in the industry, and I am very passionate about automotive, but not quite as passionate as I am about my family. So I'm very interested in having our conversation today.
Dude, it's going to be a great conversation. It really is. And you know what, like being a young father, I mean, I was actually talking to another person the other day about this, and we were talking about that, and someone said to me, they goes, "Do you remember what it was like before you were a dad?" And I'm like, not much, like I don't know if you had the same experience. I know I've talked to a few other people, and they kind of had that same experience where it's like you almost just like forget everything that kind of happened prior to that child, showing up in your life, and it's a weird feeling. It's almost like even though it can literally just be a 24-hour period, it's like everything before was like a distant memory. Did you ever get that feeling too?
Actually, it's funny enough. My wife and I were watching this show on TV recently. It's just a passive show. We've had a lot of free time recently, staying home with COVID. So we're watching the show, and it's about obviously a bunch of young people and doing their social lives. And I remember, like, it seems so long ago now
Right,
to have done
right.
some of the similar stuff, and so alien and so foreign now. I mean, with COVID and with kids, and it just seems it's like a lifetime ago, almost like a whole different. If we were different people back then, and I mean, I guess parenting does change you in a lot of ways, but it was so long ago. It seems.
I know, it's like thinking like, hey, let's make dinner reservations. Should we do it at 9 or 10 o'clock? Who the hell? Like, I'm in bed.
Yeah.
Now by like 10 o'clock. Anyways, but no, I mean, it's funny. That's a good segue kind of into our first topic is you think about just the way we utilize our time, and it's like, I always kind of think about like a schedule. And I got to be honest with you. I don't know about you, Brandon, but man, before I had kids, there was no such thing. Did a schedule? That's what old people do, right? It's just like, that wasn't something that I ever thought about maintaining. It was just time. Time wasn't, configured into these blocks, before I was a parent. And once I became a parent, it was like, oh my gosh, it was apparent, that I had to do this, and I had to block this in. And it wasn't just to block it in, but I also think through my career. I think as my career kind of evolved too, that's when I kind of got, also as well, kind of like, okay, blocking, then parenting, and then you really start blocking things into it. But I feel like the schedule, or the infamous schedule, is still one of the most difficult things, I think, as hardworking professionals and as parents, that we try to kind of balance or maintain. And I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on it and see if you got any tricks on how you've been able to kind of maintain a proper schedule.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's funny. I thinking back to, again, before kids. There was 2 times I had the work time and after work time, and now, you're a dad all the time, and so things have got a lot more fluid, and you have to be a lot more flexible with your schedule because, there's so many things that you take for granted before you have kids that once you have kids, you become a much bigger priority. So, one of the things that my current role has afforded me the ability to do is to pick up my daughter from school every day, which has been, a really, really, really great thing for her and I. We kind of bond over it. She gets to play on her playground sometimes after school. She gets to do all kinds of stuff. She catches me up on her day. She tells me all the things that happened that day, and it's been really, really nice. It's a nice break during the day, and having a flexibility of schedule and being able to work a schedule to allow you to do things like that is, for me, has been really, really beneficial and really important.
Well, I think one of the coolest things, and I think you touched on it, so I want to go down this rabbit hole a little bit more, right, is what is the byproduct of maintaining a schedule, right? The byproduct of maintaining that schedule creates routine, right? And I'm just trying to, I'm looking at the correlation between the importance of maintaining a routine within our professional life and how those kind of translate over, having that routine, like you said, being able to pick up your daughter and spending that time with them, that it gets to the point where she probably expects it, no?
Oh, absolutely. The days where, flexibility is always key, especially in the automotive industry. Try as I might to block out certain times, there's things that come up that aren't as flexible as your schedule is. So sometimes, when my wife will go to pick her up instead of myself, she'll be like, where's daddy? And I'm sure my wife doesn't always appreciate that, but the routine is something that kids come to expect, and it helps kids, I think, excel. And routine as an infant and as a toddler is important, and routine as they get a little bit older and become more independent. My daughter's striving all kinds of ways to become more independent, it seems, lately. She starts making herself breakfast in the morning now, and getting herself dressed, and sometimes overruling what I would like for her to wear and trying to what she would like to wear. So that the routine's important, and it helps them develop a sense of routine. I think is really important, but it helps them develop that sense of what's expected next. How do I do this? Getting ready for the day, getting ready for school. What happens when you come home from school? It's super beneficial to have a routine, and then that allows you to I think push in other areas.
Well, it gives you time. It gives you defined time to grow, right? And I'm just trying to think, like, when I first started selling cars, when did I actually start maintaining a routine? Because I tell you, it wasn't like, I just don't remember. I don't remember necessarily growing up with clearly defined routines. It was, yes, there was school. So school kind of naturally generated a routine. Like, you had to be there at a certain time. You got out at a certain time, and stuff like that. And I think it wasn't probably until I was doing sports heavily. That's probably when I'm trying to think, like, when did I take routine kind of to the next level? And that's when I think I started doing sports, which I think is interesting, because, I have some friends that, weren't heavy into sports when they were kids. And, it's like, I can see how this mindset of routine from a very early age, did really affected kind of my professional life in a pretty big way. Was routine a big part of your growing up?
It's funny. I had a really strong routine throughout school and high school, and I went to university, and my routine shifted drastically. It became, importance was placed on things like sleeping in, no classes in the morning, staying out quite late, certain things like that. So during university, everything kind of shifted to more of a, fly by your pants kind of routine and make things up as you go.
Yes.
And I actually kept that routine probably a lot longer than I needed to or should have. My wife really was a big supporter of me getting into the automotive industry. She understood that the time aspect of the industry was going to be pretty heavy, and she was really, really great about it. We'd actually only been married about a month or two when I got into the car industry. Did a big career change, and man, she's always been really supportive of me. And then about 2 years after I got in the automotive industry, I was a finance manager, and we had our first kid. And I was at work, and she called me, and she told me she was going into labor. And I was like, all right, I'll be right there. I had to finish getting my deliveries ready for the day so that the other business manager could take care of them for me. And about, I think 45 minutes later, she called the controller at the store because they were all friendly. And she's like, has Brandon left yet? And she's like, no, I'll go check. And she came down, and the controller started just literally pushing me out of the office because at the time, it was such a drastic change. You didn't even realize what was coming.
For sure.
And so I went there, and she pushed me out, went and did the delivery. Everything was fine. Was about 36 hours later, I think my daughter was born. And then I think it was another 36 or 40 hours or so later, I was back to work because, it was getting, I was the lead finance manager at the time, and I was a very important cornerstone of that store. And there was a lot of pressure for me to get back. So, I think my daughter had been born maybe 3 days. We were home for a day and a half, and I was back to work. So, then.
I love the fact that you bring that up real quick, right? Because, I don't think in our, let's say maybe politically correct society, that I think people actually kind of look down on that. They're like, what? You didn't spend time with your brand new newborn infant that clearly will never remember those first few months anyways? Like, I the earliest memory I have is probably when I was like maybe 6 years old, maybe five, right? Like, but no, I mean, I think people kind of, they look down on that. They see that, and they're just like, look, that's not work-life balance. Like, people use that term, and I kind of get like shivers down my spine because I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna want to say something, and I'm not sure if I should say it, right? Because I just feel like they use this blanket statement to kind of judge on how other people are utilizing their time. And see, for me, I look at work-life balance, and I perceive it as just how deep is the time I'm spending at either one, work or life, right? But people seem to think that there has to be this balance, but I'd love to kind of get your take, man. Like, did you perceive that as being work-life balance? Did anybody say anything to you when you were back at work just a few days later?
Oh, it was interesting. Being at the time, I was a commission-only salesperson or a finance manager, and my wife was a stay-at-home. Now she was a stay-at-home mom, and so there was a lot of pressure to provide and earn money, and so for me, it made sense to go back. And then you get back, and there's some people who are shocked to see you back, and there's some people who are shocked that it took you so long to come back, even though it only been a couple of days. And so I think there's still this wide divide, and some people were really, really upset that I came back so soon, and other times they didn't understand that you still have to provide. I don't have a salary to fall back on. There's not money coming in, and there's a whole bunch of new bills. So there is a pressure to get back to work, and with a second baby, things are a lot different. At this time now, I'm now more established in the automotive industry. I'm here at my store that I'm at now, and I took 2 full weeks off to be with the wife, to be with the baby, and at the end of the 2 weeks, you're ready to get back to work as well. But it's a little bit more trickier because it's really nice being around kids when they're newborns, and that time was really important in helping the wife get ready. But we were fortunate to have so much more support this time than I did for my first baby. We have family here with us this time now, and we had just more support. So it made it a lot easier to go back. And I also had a salary this time to support myself a little bit as well. So it made it easier to take more time off. But when you talk about work-life balance, sometimes there's these expectations that are put on you that are unrealistic, I found. And sometimes that the pressures that you put on yourself are sometimes, just completely internal and not even real. So I was
that's a good point. I'm going to jump in real quick. It's the pressures, right? Like for you, and I think it's different for everybody, was some of the source of the pressure that you were feeling that you have to, I don't know, maintain this balance of a scale. Like I see this kind of proverbial scale and it's like one leans towards the other, to the left, to the right, but was the source of the pressure coming from you or was it coming from outside sources? I'm just curious.
Well, for me, like I was really fortunate. I have a really strong team at my store. And I think I'd been at the store about, I'm trying to think here now, 21. I've been there about a year and a half. And the store is a really high functioning store. It's a really high performing store, and everyone plays a really important role. And for me, I'm responsible for the finance department and some other things, but mainly the finance department and some of the non-prime stuff. And of course, while you're away, the other managers will kind of touch on the stuff, but it's more or less left to your own devices for them. And they're all very capable professionals, so I wasn't worried. But you get to a point, and you want to make sure that the cart's still behind the horse and things are still going the way you want them to go. So you put this pressure on yourself to get back because you feel like you play an important part of the store. And if you're not there, that part's not being played. So for me, a lot of the pressure was internal. When I got back, everyone's like, you don't have to be back yet. Everything's okay. I'm like, well, I'm sure that's fine, but I'm happy to be back and I want to get things rolling again. So for me, I think it was a lot of internal pressures for the second baby, and the first one was definitely a lot of external pressures.
Sure,
I probably would have taken more time with the first baby and enjoyed that process a little bit more the first time around. But I was getting a lot of pressure from the store to come back. So, but the second time around, there was no pressure from the store at all. It was all internal. So I think it's, sometimes it's different even baby to baby. So.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, I remember, I have three, right? So I have my oldest, Lily, my middle is James, and then my youngest is Luke. And, I think by the time we had three, it was like, I was like, okay, I'm going back to work. Catch you later. But see, at that point in time, it was tough with Luke for me because that's when I just bought Cambridge, Mitsubishi. I was a dealer principal. I'm like, oh, geez, like, this is a whole nother level of stress and expectations, right? But to your point, and thank you, by the way, for sharing that, because you've just been very open and honest. So I appreciate that. Is the source of a lot of that pressure was not coming necessarily externally as much as it was coming internally, because I just taken over this Mitsubishi. I just bought this Mitsubishi dealership, and it was just like, okay. Like all of my years in the business, in training and in coaching and developing and working for others and, saving everything I could from money perspective led up to this point. Like I had to be successful. And, Brandon, I got to be totally honest with you, man. And I'm not excited about this. And it's something that I'll just have to kind of just live with. But first 2 years of Luke's life, I really wasn't around. Like I really wasn't. I did not maintain a balance. Now, see, I could have maintained a balance. It was my choice. I chose not to maintain a balance. I chose to put every, I think, ounce of my efforts, and that's not just time. I'm going to say like energy as well, right? Because there's a difference between time and energy, right? I put all my time and my energy into my business. And there was what my family was getting at that point in time, dude, honestly, was just the scraps. And for me, that's where I go when it's like work-life balance. It's not necessarily that I'm spending 40 hours on my career and another 40 hours on my family. It's like it's the time that is being spent. You have that level of energy. You have that level of intention. You're being intentional with that time. And I think that what makes a big difference is kind of like, when you were talking about your schedule, right? You're being intentional, with that schedule. But a lot of that pressure came from myself, not from others, even though I still think that there's a little bit of society pressure out there, but I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think for me, and there's all these different societal pressures out there. Absolutely. For me, I actually went through, I'd say, like 3 different parenting phases so far, and each of them kind of was capped off or started by this parenting epiphany that I had. So the very first one, when my daughter was born, everyone has this moment when they're holding their kid for the first time and everything changes, and immediately, I had my daughter in my hands and I was holding her, and I think I'm putting her to sleep one night or rocking her or just talking to her, and immediately I just wanted to give her everything that I possibly could. I wanted to provide for her. I wanted to provide for the family. I wanted to have them the best life possible. So for me, I immediately went really, really hard into work. I pushed harder than ever. I wanted to sell more than ever. I wanted to make more money than ever. So that really became working more than ever. And thankfully, I had a strong support system. My wife is amazing, and she was really able to take care of the kid at the time, Thea, my youngest. And I worked bell to bell for a while, making as much money as I could, working as much as I could, because I wanted them to have everything. For sure. And that was really great, and that led to me getting more opportunities. And I went to a different store, and then I was able to, at that store, I kind of had a second epiphany where, I was working a commission job because I had chosen to work commission. I really believed that commission was, for me, was an excellent opportunity because I controlled how much money I made. But the trade-off there was that you worked as much as you could. So then I had the opportunity to become a sales manager, and it kind of coincided with this first, or I guess the second epiphany that I had. And that was that, working all the time is not maybe the best idea. Maybe being present and available for the kids and for the wife a little bit more, starting to develop a schedule and some expectations.
A routine, right?
Had a benefit. So I became a sales manager with a schedule, and I made a little bit less money, but I was able to be present and still grow in the industry and learn more things. So now I'm a sales manager and going there, but of course I'm a very competitive, driven person. And for me, I ended up working almost just as much again. I had eventually, the GSM that was there, I eventually replaced him and became the GSM. And the day that I did that, I worked bell to bell for 3 months straight at that store as the only sales manager. Or there was no GM, there was just me as the GSM. And then I had a team that I was growing, and we were a really high performing store. We had grown leaps and bounds. When I first came in there, I think we were doing maybe 40 to 60 units a month, and now we're up to about 100, 110 units a month, or more like 100 and probably 150. And no, maybe 110. And but we were growing, and everything was pushing, and you work bell to bell for 3 months straight, you start to need a break. So we hired a second sales manager, which was great. Was able to get back to a schedule again, and things are going well. And then the wife and I start talking again about where we're going, what's important, what's the plan, and a second kid was on the horizon. We were talking about it, trying to make plans. And one of the things that we had realized is I was working and living in Fredericton at the time, and it was just us out there. We had no friends or family other than the coworkers that we're with, which I still consider friends to this day. But you don't go to coworkers and ask them for the same kind of help you get from other friends. So so we talked about it, that maybe it was time to look at moving closer to home, which for myself and my wife was Halifax. And so I spoke with my dealer principal at the time, David Leary, who was an amazing guy. I'm someone I look up to and respect quite a bit and learned a lot from. And we had a conversation, and I more or less gave him notice that I was going to be looking to move back to Halifax in like 6 or 7 months before anything was even going to happen. And kudos to him. He kept me on. He understood what I was doing, and he trusted in me to work to my full potential to my very last day, which I don't think happens a lot in this industry. A lot of times, if you 100%. Say you're looking elsewhere, you get walked out. So, but he trusted in me, and so eventually we had worked us to come in here. And then, probably my last epiphany that I had was kind of about halfway through this pandemic. I had my second daughter, Everly, during the pandemic. She was born in February. Oh my goodness. Sorry about that. No, just a second. I'm in the middle of my parenting podcast. Right. The joys of parenting.
Hey man, that's what it is. That's what it's all about, right there, right there.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I don't even know if I'm going to cut that out because I think that's absolutely perfect. But we'll
leave it in. We'll leave it in. It's all good.
It in, right? You know, but no. Look, like, I'm curious because I'm listening to you. I'm kind of listening to these different epiphanies that you have, and kind of your also your evolution, just kind of in business and in management in particular. And I was thinking while you were talking, you know, there's a lot of skill sets that go along with being a parent, but equally a lot of I think as many skill sets that kind of goes along as being a manager, a good manager, right? Like I think of a manager is equally a manager as much as they are a leader. You know, like a really like sometimes it's hard, but every once in a while you will find those two individuals in that one person, right? Someone that can manage and lead people at the same time. But I feel like as parents, we have to do the exact same thing. Right? It's one thing for me just to be able to manage, all right, my family and my kids, you know, when they're getting, you know, especially my oldest, she's in that tween age, you know, where it's just like, yeah, you know, so it's, but I realized recently that I'm being more of a manager and less of a leader. And I'm curious, you know, do you feel, or have you kind of seen, you know, those transferable skills from, you know, from managing, leading over to parenting, and kind of what's the connection you've seen?
Absolutely. Excuse me. You know, it's funny. There's been also times where you'll get frustrated with you know, one of your people that you're responsible for at work, or frustrated with your kids. And, you know, sometimes I remember one time I was really frustrated with my daughter, Thea. She wasn't listening. She was kind of just doing her own thing. We were looking to go for sometime, and, you know, just wasn't really being, I guess, for lack of a better word, accountable, or I wasn't being accountable to her. And so I thought back to some things as a manager. You know, if someone's not following your expectations, there's 3 reasons why. And, you know, they either don't understand what you mean, they don't know what you expect, or they just don't care. And so, you know, I kind of thought, you know what, maybe Thea doesn't understand what I'm looking for right now. So I kind of put on the manager hat and used some of the manager skills. We had a little conversation, and suddenly everything was all good. And you know, so sometimes some of these skills as a manager or a leader, you know, can transfer to being a parent. But, you know, oftentimes some of the things that I learned being a parent, I've transferred over to being a manager. You know, I've become a lot more patient as a manager after having been a dad. Which I think is a good thing. I think patience is an important skill for both being a parent and being a manager or a leader. And you're right. I mean, I think a manager and a leader are very different things, but if you can find someone who is both, that is a worthwhile person to develop and keep and hang on to, because it's not very often will you find someone who is both. A lot of people become managers and think that they're automatically leaders when, you know, you can be made a manager, but you can't be made a leader. You gotta grow into a leader. And I think the similar for a parent. You know, you can be made a father, but it takes a little bit more to become you know, an involved parent or a dad.
100%.
But, you know, being flexible and learning things and being patient, and then you know, for me, a lot of the growth I've had as a manager and both as a parent have come in these times where I've had to come up moments of, you know, self-awareness and getting a little bit perspective on what I'm doing, and kind of just looking at myself from, you know, 10 degrees, or, you know, looking out yourself, kind of looking in, you know, if I was watching this, how would I expect myself to respond? How would I expect myself to act, either as a parent or a manager? And that ability to kind of step outside your skin, step outside your body, and kind of analyze the situation, I think has caused me the biggest times for my growth. I was on LinkedIn. I wrote a couple of articles called "The Confessions of a Sales Manager." I looked back at my time when I was at Franklin Mitsubishi. There were a couple of things that were really big learning moments for myself, but you know, I didn't really learn about them. Those moments didn't come in the moment. They came, you know, sometimes days, weeks, or even months later. One of the articles where I talked about a mistake I made when I didn't hire someone, you know, I think it was 2 years later. I really looked back on that. I was like, man, I was really wrong there. I really made a mistake. And those times where you can look back and have these reflections and be critical of yourself, and be critical of the decisions that you made or the actions you took, will allow you to grow. And if you can do that as a manager, you're going to become an even better manager. You'll become a good leader. And if you do as a parent,
right?
Same thing again.
100%. I think, some of the most what am I trying to say here? Some of the most successful managers. It's early in the morning. I'm getting tongue-tied here.
Absolutely.
Right? That I have ever met kind of have this, this uncanny ability to be able to just, acknowledge kind of their mistakes, but then really be willing to learn from the mistakes. It's one thing to be able to acknowledge. I think a lot of people can acknowledge, look, I made a mistake. All right. But I think it takes a true leader to be able to actually learn from that mistake and then change it. And I love what you were kind of saying about, that correlation between, kind of coaching our team, developing our sales team, it's so similar to the way that we kind of have to approach, we got to coach our kids. We need to develop our kids, and it's like if we maintain those routines, some amazing things can happen. Like I know we're getting towards the tail end of our time, and I'm confident we can probably go a lot longer. But but before I let you go, Brandon, for everybody out there that's watching and listening right now, who maybe like to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
Absolutely. I kind of touched on it there, but LinkedIn is definitely the best way. I think my address is Brandon Smith at Steel Chev would be the, LinkedIn, Brandon Smith at Steel Chev. I'm sure you can have a link on there somewhere.
Of course.
That would be the easiest way. I'm on there frequently. Feel free to send me a message. I love to connect with people and chat. Love to help troubleshoot other people. I've actually had a couple people reach out to me for some other podcasts that we've done. So love to hear people. The other thing too, just real quick, is parenting is not an innate skill. It's something you need to work on, and asking for help or going to other places for help will only make you better. It's not an admission of failure or anything like that. And the same thing's true of being a manager or being a salesperson. Everyone should ask for help. Everyone should get help, and it will only make you better. But really appreciate the time, Jason. So,
Brandon, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for just being open and sharing your stories with us. And I'm sure people out there watching and listening are going to pick up something from this, man. So really, really thank you for just, being open with us. You have yourself an amazing time. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you. I love our chats. Look forward to the next one.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business of Parenting podcast with your host, Jason Harris. Don't want to miss new content? Be sure to check out the full podcast library at strategywithjason.com to stay in the know. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Happy podcasting.